The Frontline podcast is brought to you by Legion Technologies. Hi, we're your hosts, Tracy Chernoff, Senior Director of Employee Engagement at Legion Technologies.
And John Denton, Senior Enterprise Account Executive at Legion Technologies. Hourly employees want and need flexibility and predictability. They desire more connection and belonging with their peers and companies. And businesses want to maximize productivity while enhancing employee engagement to reduce turnover. Who said we can't have it all?
The Frontline podcast is focused on discussing the challenges that come along with having an hourly workforce and shedding light on these important employees who are often overlooked. You'll hear from leaders bringing transformational and innovative change to their organization and ways you can improve your own experience and the experiences of your employees, no matter where you sit in your organization.
At Legion, we believe that intelligent automation powers Legion Technology workforce management to solve these challenges. Be sure to subscribe to the Frontline podcast so you're the first to hear our monthly episodes, which will come out every third Thursday of every month. Learn more at legion.co. Follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn and get ready to be a part of the solution.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here for another week. This is the Frontline podcast where we talk all about frontline workers, the challenges, and how businesses can focus more on their employees. And so with me, I have my co-host, John Denton, and we are doing a recap on NRF. And if you don't know what NRF is, it is the National Retail Federation, and they just had their big show in the Javits Center in New York. And we were there. We were both there. John, it was so nice to meet you in person.
I know it was great. We've had a lot of conversations on phone calls, but it was awesome to actually be in person.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like next year we should do a live podcast recording. I'm going to manifest that for us.
I couldn't agree more. And I think Kristen actually mentioned that as well while we were on site there.
It would be really cool if we had, whether it was like a live session or just like a podcasting booth at our booth. And then we could bring in people for, I don't know, there's probably a whole question and answer segment that we could add by bringing in people from the if anyone's not from New York, like me, I mean, the Javits Center is huge. It's where all of those conferences happen. So there were, what were there, like 30,000 people there?
I mean, there was a lot. I was actually really pumped up about it. I mean, it was when I walked in and, of course, from the last 3 years, from 2020 till this point, I wasn't sure what kind of turnout there was going to be there. And when I walked in and saw the crowds, it was very exciting, right? Because we know that retail is back and thriving. So, that amongst looking at all the booths and all the creativity and everybody that really participated, did a really great job altogether.
Totally. Well, before we talk about and highlight the booths that we loved, because there were many, including our own, I definitely want to bring us to this topic around like how exciting NRF was, because it really was. And I know, a lot of it, to your point, like seeing all those people there coming out of a time where we were all just working remotely and not engaging with one another in person for a number of years, to being in the Javits Center with all of these people, and just like it was hyper socialization. And I'm sure all of the introverts in the room were like decompressing every day because it was so intense. But one of the things that I thought about, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, was how we at Legion, we were not at NRF's retail's big show last year because of COVID. And so this was almost like our, a spring awakening for us. We came back better than ever with this amazing booth, which we'll talk about. But it was just, I think everyone, at least from our team, was really feeling that, like, wow, we have to like just hit this one out of the park.
Well, you got to think about it too. Like it's been a long time for a lot of people to have that level of interaction, right? So, for me, I'm in my office on a daily basis, and I talk to a lot of people on the phone, and I love talking to people. But it's a whole different ballgame once you get in person, right? And then it's like repetitive. It's one person after another. So, introverted or not, it does ultimately end up, you have to decompress when you get back home or back to your hotel because there's just a lot of conversation that had to happen. You had to be on your game, pretty much the entire time. And so I know that I slept really well each night myself.
Yes. Well, being in my basically my hometown, even though I'm from New Jersey, but the city I grew up right outside of the city. So I didn't get as much sleep as I anticipated because I was just so excited to be there, and to see friends or hang out with coworkers who I haven't seen or met before. Or haven't seen in a while. But aside, that's my truth at least. I'm willing to share that I was not totally sleeping as much as I thought. But I think in those moments when we are in person, that's where people tend to like take advantage of the ability to socialize in person or connect in person. I mean, even when we were working, we were talking about work, we were at our booth and like focused on the conversations that we had to have, but it's still also like a team building in a way. And one of the things like that I thought of too, I don't know if this ever crossed your mind while there, whenever I went to grab lunch, I thought about how many meals the frontline employees at the Javits Center were like churning out every single like moment of the day. Basically, there was even like an Amazon store there that didn't require any employees, which was interesting. Maybe one, but I don't know. That was one of my first thoughts actually, considering we're the
Yeah,
Frontline podcast.
and what's interesting too is that the lines were as long as they were, but they were able to process people fairly quickly through those lines, and some of it was because the technology was advanced, right, and they were able to process people quicker. Some of it was because they just had the right amount of people at the right time to help process the crowd, right, and you could tell from the hours of about 11 a.m. to 1. That was when the heaviest traffic was there, and that's when I tried to
Mhm.
avoid eating my lunch.
Right. Right.
But yeah, I mean, to your point, it was impressive how well they did with that, and I think they must use an advanced scheduling solution like Legion to be able to process employees or process customers quickly like that.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. Speaking of Legion, I feel like we do have to give some credit to the booths that were at NRF. And so, for anyone who has not been to a trade show type of event like NRF's big show, like the one that we went to, it's truly a trade show. I mean, there are booths everywhere. There are multiple levels of booths, and some booths are, straight informational and some booths are super interactive. So, John, I know you had some opportunities to go to some of these booths, and I also want to make sure that we talk about our Legion booth because it was amazing. But what were some of the booths that you thought did it best?
Well, it's always fun to see what creative ideas people are going to come up with to drive traffic to their booth. There was a couple of them that stood out to me. One and a colleague of mine, Bart, walked past this booth and they had just a couch and a couple guitars, and so we sat down and just played the guitar, and of course from there we got into a conversation, right? So between that, I think coffee was a big hit as well. If you had
Hmm.
coffee at your booth, and then of course, the alcohol at around 4 or 5 was also a big hit as well. So, and with our booth, I think we did a fantastic job with the retail gate party on Sunday,
Hmm.
right? Kicking it off, having the playoff games going. You could see the crowd around the booth, the crowd inside of the booth, all the conversation. I took a second to kind of step back and just look at our booth and look at all the interactions that were happening. It was incredible to see. Everybody on our team was front and center, trying to have as many conversations as possible. And it seemed like everybody around was open to talk as well. So it was great.
Yeah, I totally agree. The retail gate that we did was definitely my favorite, especially since the Giants played. And, by the time this episode comes out, we already know that the Giants lost miserably to the Eagles. But, that game when the Giants won, even though we only caught the beginning of it at our retail gate party, and it was the Bills game that we had most of the time spent watching that game, it was still like super amazing. So many people were crowded around, and that was that retail gate party was hosted by us and a couple of our partners like Zipline, Ubic, and that was super awesome. But when I think about the partnerships too, and like the different things that we did with Ubic or with Zipline, it was interesting because, you see these people in meetings, like we're talking business most of the time, but then you put on a football game and everyone's just like the same football person in the room having a beer. We had wings at the retail gate party too, which was a lot of fun. But the other thing, so you mentioned coffee. Actually, I think my favorite installment was the espresso bar that we had the first day, because I always bring it back to the mission that we're on and what we're doing. And so I had an opportunity to speak with the barista. I think that would be the proper way to say it. His name was Zion, and he was so passionate about the espressos and the drinks that he was making. And you could see it, like every single second that he was there as the barista, he was just like smiling and engaging with each person that came up to our booth. And I know that this might sound a little bit corny, but I really, not only did I appreciate that, obviously, from a business perspective, because here we've essentially employed this service, and asked Zion and his team to, support us at this event. But I asked him, like, why you love what you do? It's really infectious. Like, we can see that you love what you're doing. And he was like, yeah, I just really love that, each cup of coffee is like personally made for the person that I'm giving this coffee to, and that they're going to enjoy it. I like to make people happy, and I like to know that someone is satisfied after they have something that I've made for them. And that like story, I always like to bring in a personal anecdote, but that story really kind of set the stage for me for the whole week that or the few days that we were at NRF, because that's exactly what we're doing this for. That's what Legion is all about, is like turning hourly jobs into good jobs. And of course, for Zion, he's passionate about this, which certainly helps, because not everyone's going to be passionate about what they're doing. He was. And every single person that was in that line to get a cup of coffee from Zion loved the coffee and noticed how happy he was doing what he was doing. And so all of this is to say that when an employee is experiencing something great, when they have a great experience, when they're happy, when they're engaged, so is the customer. And it just like so obviously translates into customer experience. So I loved having that experience with him and taking that away.
Yeah, it goes back to the age-old formula. Happy employees equal happy customers, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you couldn't have hit it more on the head with what we do and why we're passionate about what we do at Legion, because we care about the customer, we care about the employees, and that's one thing that, talking to Zion, and I had a couple of Zion's coffee, and it was very delicious. And oh, by the way, I don't know if you made it back with your New York Giants hat. I think I might have accidentally threw it in the trash.
Yes,
But,
that
you
Giants
did.
hat did not leave my side. Yes, because they won. So,
Okay, but yeah, no, it's a good perspective to have too, that Zion has, and one that we really encompass here, not only with the culture and how we treat our employees here, but how we want to treat our customers, right, and how we want them to treat their employees and ultimately their customers. So, one of the conversations I had with an individual, which I won't name the company, was really about that. It was about how you have happy employees and how that can create a better customer satisfaction, right, or happy customers. And one of the things that we talked about was starting from demand forecasting through labor optimization to scheduling optimization, right? So how do we make that happen, and how can we help them get to that point? And one of the things that we dove into and really looked under the hood was, it all starts with that first part of the process, which is the volume forecasting, demand forecasting, right? So if you can't get that first part right, you're probably not going to get the labor modeling right and the scheduling optimization right, because everything downstream gets impacted by that. So ultimately, what ended up in us having, what ultimately ended up coming out of that discussion was, well, how do I fix the schedules to make sure that I have all the Zions in the right place at the right time when I'm busiest and all my customers are coming in? And so, it was a really great conversation. Unfortunately, I got to have tons of those conversations while we were there. I probably had at least 50 of those types of conversations. And it was really cool to see that everybody was excited about being there, and just talking to a few other people about how their experience was at NRF. They were like, look, I can get you know, 20 times as much stuff done in 3 days being here with all my vendors, all the
Mhm.
different conversations that we have in preparation for 2023 by being an NRF. And so but yeah, I mean, it was just an awesome event, and was certainly happy to be there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think it was so cool because, you connect with so many people on LinkedIn throughout the year, and then meeting people within that same space, because so many people were there, and many retailers, vendors, like you said, um tech companies like us. I mean, you get an opportunity to really like put a face to the name in a different way outside of a LinkedIn DM. And I've been to other conferences before, like HR Tech, and there were people that I met there for the first time that I then saw again at NRF, and it was really cool because there was this awesome opportunity to reconnect, and it kind of like drives home the ability to network in a real way, because that was something that I definitely missed during COVID. So I don't know. I although I left exhausted, I was so thrilled by all of the takeaways and all that whole experience. It was awesome.
Well, what was your favorite part of the event if you had to nail it down to one? Put you on the spot.
Hmm. Oh yeah, this is tough. I'm really bad at picking like favorites. I just
Hmm.
always end up giving a list. So this is just one of my fatal flaws. Um I might have to say I
I'm
might
hoping
have
you're
to
going to go with the.
say the Yeah, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I'm hoping you were going to go with the big ideas session because you were a part of that session. But go
I
ahead
was
and
thinking about that. That crossed my mind. It did cross
yes.
my mind for a moment there. Like, oh yeah, the big idea session was great, but I think the retail gate might be it,
Yeah.
because it was electric. Like the number of people, and also I know that there were people who came back for wings 3, 4, 5 times.
Mhm.
And by the end of it, there were some people who didn't get wings, but there were like hundreds of people standing around. And so, just to paint the picture here for everyone listening and who wasn't there, we had screens at our booth and we displayed the football game. And Zipline was our partner on that, and they also had TV screens, and so they had the game on as well, both games. So it started, I guess, at like 1:30 or 3:30 maybe, and that was the
Yeah.
Bills game, and then at 5:30 was the Giants game. And so it took us into the end of the showcase or NRF for that day. And so literally hundreds of people were standing around. And I remember, like, for anyone watching this, you're going to see me like reenact this, but I remember walking around the booth because I was kind of near the one screen near Zipline chatting with some folks. And I walked around our booth and came to the front of the booth, and everyone's just standing there watching the game. Like, no, I mean, literally everyone's like, are the Bills going to win? What's going to happen with the Bills? And it was just, it was really cool because I don't know, I find that there's a lot of camaraderie in sports, even though I'm very competitive and I'm a New York sports fan. And, there are many arguments that you can get into with any other sports fan, right? But and I know you're a Cowboys fan, so
That's
we're
right.
not going to go there, but we have opposing teams. Um, but my point is that I think with sports, like, there is so much camaraderie just generally, because people just love to be around one another and root on their teams, even if you're sitting with a friend of the enemy. You're still going to enjoy the experience. So I think that might be my favorite. But the big idea session was my favorite in a different way. It
Okay.
was just a
Yeah.
different kind of favorite.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, you were spotlighted in the big ideas session, and certainly you did a lot of preparation, I'm sure, for that meeting. So
Yeah, that was awesome. That was
yeah.
awesome. And actually, I know you'll probably guide us into that discussion, but the one thing that I wanted to mention about these sessions is that there were tons and tons of sessions within the big ideas session and like speaking stage. And Kristen, who is our colleague, and she is the head of marketing for Legion, she was able to go and see many of the speaking sessions, but she said that her favorite was the one with PepsiCo. And so it was called Rethinking the Company Associate Experience with PepsiCo Foods, North America's Stephen Williams. I don't know Stephen's role at PepsiCo, so I apologize, but on our blog, actually, we have like the video recap linked, and I have to watch it. But she shared in the blog that one of the things that Stephen Williams shared was his view on managing an hourly workforce, which will tie into our discussion on the Big Idea session that I did. But he basically said flexibility is the new currency for frontline retention. And I'm like, where can we get a meeting with Stephen Williams? Because his ideology matches ours. Like, it's just such a wonderful, simple, and clear way to put what we're solving for. And so I wanted to shout that out because I really enjoyed Kristen's blog on this, and we can share this in the show notes so others can read. But I thought it was a really great recap.
And so how to ultimately, what did you come out of that session thinking? Or is this Kristen? I'm sorry.
Well, I didn't go. Yeah, this is Kristen. I didn't go, but I do plan to watch the video recap that's linked because it sounds really interesting. I mean, she goes on to say here in the blog that, investing in the employee experience and focusing on removing work friction points through the power of intelligent automation is really how you can drive that flexibility. And that Stephen Williams added within the session that technology investments are employee investments. And I love that because there's a really huge stigma around technology that, there's this misconception that technology replaces human interaction or replaces employees, and it just doesn't. There's a perfect intersection between technology and people, and we are right in the center of that.
Yeah, and it's those are conversations I had a lot on the floor as well. Is how do we connect the employee experience and technology, right? And that's really what everybody is moving towards, and it's whether or not you're jumping on that ship or you're going to stay behind. And really, the whole thought process around that is just creating a efficient, productive workforce, right? One that can, you look at, essentially it's become an expectation to have some sort of mobility application on your phone that's going to help you source and be able to execute your job in the stores, right? So it's not only become a competitive differentiator for retailers to, attract talent, but also creating an efficient workforce, which allows us, one of the things that allows Legion to be as successful in the retail space as we are is by creating an efficient. So it's interesting because that's one of the things that makes our Legion automated scheduling solution so dynamic, in that we really try to focus on maximizing the labor efficiency and employee engagement simultaneously.
Yeah, 1,000%, which actually is a perfect segue because my Big Idea session that I did with Sanish Mandkar, who is our CEO and founder, he was actually a guest on this podcast a little while back. He and I did a speaking session at the Big Ideas stage, and it was called Maximize Labor Efficiency and Employee Engagement Simultaneously, produced by Legion. And so this concept of maximizing labor efficiency and employee engagement simultaneously, that's exactly it. When I say, we're at the intersection of technology and people, that's exactly what that means. The technology is the labor optimization and demand forecasting, and the people, it's the employee experience that translates then into the customer experience. So, when we think about this, like visually, if you think about, driving your car and you can either approach a fork in the road, or you could actually have a crossroads. And it's at the center of the crossroads, because we don't do forks in the road. We're not telling you to do one or the other. We don't do that over here. We're saying we're at a crossroads here, but in a way that's symbiotic. So in the center of that crossroads is where we say technology and employee engagement. Yeah. So I like to create a visual, and that's the visual for me. And that was like something that I really tried to hone in on not only at our booth, but also during that speaking session, because, the listeners who have been here since episode 1 know that I come from a customer background with Legion, and I worked in retail my entire career up until joining Legion on the HR team. Yeah, so this session, focused a lot on the problems that we were solving when I was on the customer side. It was the needing for the demand forecasting, it was labor optimization, and let's be clear, labor optimization does not mean that we're reducing workforces. That is a common misconception, and we've got to get this right. Labor optimization is about putting the right person in the right place at the right time. And then finally, really focusing on employee engagement. And then through those three things that I talked about in the big ideas session, I was able to also showcase the ROI when we rolled out Legion. So it was an awesome speaking session. It was recorded, so I'll make sure to include that recording in the show notes too if you want to catch that. But thank you for joining that. I know you came to that.
You did great, and
Thanks.
it seemed like you had fun doing it. I think that
Yeah.
that comes out right in the audience. So and you can tell you're passionate. I didn't know personally that you had that customer background, so I learned something new while I was sitting there. And then, of course, some of the points that you brought up were outstanding throughout the session. And I got to look at the crowd to an extent, and I had a few of my prospects in the crowd, and they were really pumped up. You could tell that
Oh, that's
about the
awesome.
story that you told. So
That's awesome. Yeah. It was, those speaking sessions are a ton of fun. And this was like a huge area. There were so many seats and I was kind of like hyping myself up. I'm like, okay, there are 400 seats. If there are 400 people there, like we're going to knock it out of the park. And I was like, there are 400. And on the flip side, I was also like, let's stay humble. So I said, okay, there are 400 seats. If there are only two people there, we're going to knock it out of the park, And so I think we did that. And there were certainly more than two. There were less than 400, but I was really grateful to be on that stage with Sanish, and I think he also had a great time. We felt really good coming out of that.
yeah, you both really, I think, hit on some great points throughout the session. One thing that actually resonates with me as well is how do you allocate labor when budgets are decreasing, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
really leveraging your existing budget. And that's again, another conversation that I had to have multiple times, and I love having it. Uh, was That's exactly what we do, right? We determine where some of those efficiencies are with your existing labor budget, and make sure that we're allocating labor at the right time. So, and I would encourage everybody to click the link and watch. It was certainly a great show.
Thank you. And, I was losing my voice by that point, and so when I was watching back the video, I was like, "Oh, no, my voice is a little hoarse," but, hopefully anyone who listens enjoys it. But, that is one of the downfalls to being at a conference where you are it's super loud because there's so many people there, and some booths have music and stuff. And so you're talking constantly. I was literally, I don't think I shut my mouth for like at least more than like 2 minutes
Yeah.
throughout that entire, 4 days that we were there. And so by the time the speaking session rolled around, I think we were one of the last sessions. And I was like, all right, I'm going to save my voice up until this point, and we're going to just, again, knock it out of the park. And it was awesome. It was really cool to meet people after also and hear their anecdotes, hear their questions through the session. So if you were there and you're listening, thank you for attending. And hopefully we'll have an even bigger presence at NRF next year and an even more amazing booth. And hopefully we'll get Zion back for the espresso making, or at least the espresso booth, because I think everyone was like, "Oh, we need to have that again." And can we have it every day? Because we all needed that boost of energy throughout the day, I think.
Yeah, and I'll have to second that, along with happy hours are always a positive as
Right.
well.
Yes, everyone loves the happy hours at the booths. It's really just a huge social and networking event, but obviously it's all focused on retail. And as a retailer, as a former retailer myself, I think it's really exciting being at shows like that because you see how alive and kicking retail is. And there's always, retail's always in the headlines, like, oh, retail going through a difficult time. Retail will always be here. Retail is the most like progressive, agile, innovative industry within an industry. Like we're talking about people who are passionate about providing incredible experiences to people through their products or their, goods. And it's just really cool to be come from that world and be in a place like NRF where you can see it and feel the energy around retail. So I really appreciated being there.
Yeah, well said. Likewise, it was good energy. Crowds were great. I felt really energized coming out of there and ready to hit the ground running when I got back to my office.
Mhm. Yes, yes. Well, with that, do you have any closing remarks? Because we are at the end of our episode today.
No, I just again would encourage everybody to click the link and watch the Big Idea session and any additional links that are provided by Tracy. And
Well, as we have said numerous times now, it was an amazing, amazing event. And to John's point, we're just excited to kind of keep the ball rolling and continue the conversation. So don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. And as John mentioned, make sure you click those links in the show notes. And we will see you next month for another episode. Thank you all so much for being here. Stay tuned.